The main character of GTA Liberty City Stories is Tony Cipriani, a gangster whom we met a little earlier in the GTA series. Tony already appeared in GTA 3, where he played the role of one of the people who gave Claude missions on behalf of the powerful Lyonnais Mafia. To get a better idea of the timeline, it is worth adding that GTA 3 was developed 4 years before GTA Liberty City Stories. However, the events we witness in GTA Liberty City Stories take place 3 years prior to the events of GTA 3. This is quite an important thing to remember that may be useful to us today. The action of GTA Liberty City Stories begins in 1998 in the fictional city of Liberty City, based on New York City. Tony Cipriani, a member of the Lyonnais crime family, returns to the city after a long absence. An absence since Tony had to hide outside the city for some time after he murdered one of the more important members of a hostile mob organization also operating in Liberty City. Tony expects to be welcomed with splendor and glory, but in reality, he witnessed a rather unpleasant surprise. The Don of the Lyonnais, Salvatore Leone, quickly forgot about Cipriani's huge contribution to the family and decided to degrade him in the structure of the organization. It also turns out that during Tony's absence, Salvatore has found a new puppet, Vincenzo Silli, who is a newly minted capo of the crime family, and now he is the guy Tony has to work for. Cipriani, as a distinguished member of the Mafia, does not hide his frustration with this. He sees that his former achievements have pretty much been forgotten and that he will have to climb the Mafia ladder again, unfortunately starting from the very bottom. And so Tony, having no choice, goes to Vincenzo the next day. As expected, Vincenzo wants to make Tony his errand boy. Tony starts doing the worst kind of work for Vincenzo, getting a drug dealer to work, saving Lyonnais members from a failed robbery. Tony risks a lot and receives nothing in return. Fortunately, the situation gets very interesting quickly. Tony learns from Vincenzo that Joseph Daniel O'Toole, known as JD, who works at the Sindacos brothel called Polly's Review Bar, wants to join the Lyonnais Mafia. Vincenzo says he wants to take advantage of the situation in such a way that JD will simply become the Lyonnais family's informant in Sindacos ranks. Thanks to JD's information, the Lyonnais family will always be one step ahead of the Sindacos. The plan seems perfect. Shortly after, Tony decides to stand up to Vincenzo. Tony's decision is a consequence of the fact that Vincenzo probably tried to expose Tony to the feds by ordering him to pick up prostitutes in a car that coincidentally, as Vincenzo claimed, was under surveillance. So to sum it all up, Tony decides not to do any more tasks for Vincenzo. Cipriani now focuses on getting his money from JD, which JD once borrowed from the main character. JD doesn't have money, but he knows how to get it. The problem is that he needs help. Tony quickly realizes that this is probably the only way to get his money back, so he decides to help JD in the end. Tony starts collecting money from prostitutes. He destroys a very important business called the Doll House, which serves as a brothel and casino in one and belongs to the Sindacos. This is where JD's help came in very handy. JD also provides important information about the planned raid by the Sindaco Mafia on the casino owned by the Lyonnais, which is thriving and serves as an equally important business as the dollhouse was for the Sindacos. In the meantime, Tony meets with her mother, who hates him, to be frank. Tony's mother mocks him for saying that Tony ran away from the city like a big coward and that he wants forgiveness. Of course, the woman completely doesn't care about the argument that her son had no choice but to leave Liberty City for some time. In the following days, Tony tries to prove to his mother that he is a real man. Tony manages to, among other things, reveal that Giovanni Casa, who is a real angel in the eyes of Cipriani's mother, is really an ordinary pervert. Tony also shows his mother that he is not afraid of the triads, which she constantly accuses him of. Moreover, the protagonist even wins some stupid race with Dan Sucho and then kills him, which was also, to put it mildly, suggested to Tony by his mother. Later on, Tony murders Giovanni Casa, who stopped paying tribute after Tony caught him doing strange activities, and of course, it was all for his ma. However, this is not enough for Tony's mother. The woman now hates her son so much that she decides to send heavily armed hitmen to kill him. After this thread, Tony breaks off contact with his mother for some time and starts doing several small tasks for Don Leone. This work is to persuade the head of the union, Jane Hopper, to cooperate with Salvatore Leone. Hopper does not want to allow Salvatore to gain 24/7 access to the docks during the strike, so that mobsters can unload some goods that will bring the mafia a big profit when the merchandise hits the city streets. At this point, a lot of things start to happen. On the streets of Portland, there is a constant fight between criminal groups, in which the Leone Mafia is heavily involved. In the meantime, Tony is also bothered by Maria Latour, the beloved of the head of the Leone family. But what is worse about this is that Tony gets in serious trouble and has to deal with this crazy junkie who is blackmailing him into all this, which means that the main character has to be at her every whim. Tony and Maria have to go shopping. He has to take her to drug dealers. Another time, Maria's lover, a man called Wayne, beat her up, so Tony had to go and fuck him up. And yet, in another instance, Maria overdoses, so Mr. Cipriani has to drive the princess around the city in search of her mysterious lost medicine. On top of all that, Massimo Turini, a high-ranking member of the Sicilian Mafia, comes to the city. He is allegedly trying to conclude a truce between three mafia families: the Leones, the Forellis, and the Sindacos. When Tony talks to JD, he tells him that Salvatore senses some conspiracy in all this. Therefore, Tony is sent to spy on Turini and observe what's going to do after the meeting. Well, Salvatore was right. Turini wants to reach an agreement with local gangs such as the Diablos and the Triads. It can be therefore concluded that the Sicilians want to weaken the mafias operating in the city so that they can take over the whole city for themselves. There are a lot of new things coming to light in the next few days. Salvatore orders JD to be killed because he is afraid that in these difficult times, he may turn against him for various reasons and sell some valuable information to the enemies. Shortly after that, Vincenzo tries to contact Tony. He says that he had to think everything over, and now he wants to make peace. Cipriani goes there, but he is quite skeptical about this. However, once he arrives, it quickly turns out that Vincenzo lied to him. He only wants to set a trap for Tony, from which, fortunately, Tony escapes unscathed, killing Vincenzo in the process. Unfortunately, Tony Cipriani still has no time to rest. The after effects of Turini's work are starting to become more and more visible. The Diablos begin to attack the Leones' territory. The situation is no better with the Triads, who in turn are trying to destroy Salvatore's warehouse, which contains a lot of money, which Tony, ironically, was supposed to collect. After Tony deals with the Diablos and Triads, he goes to his boss, who tells him that it's time to move to Staunton Island. There's some business to take care of. The first target on the second island is the city's mayor, Roger C. Hull. Roger is in the Forelli's pocket, which is the main reason he is obsessed with blaming Salvatore for things that Sal hasn't even done. In the end, Tony makes a successful attempt to assassinate the current mayor. This is one of Tony's larger successful actions, which is why Salvatore wants to reward him heavily. Tony officially joins the family. It's a big day for him. Even Tony's mother breaks the silence and congratulates her son. In fact, she even canceled all hitman contracts that were put on Tony, which by the way was quite annoying for him when some hitmen were attacking Cipriani from time to time. However, there is not much time to celebrate. The elections for a new mayor are just around the corner. Salvatore tells Tony to contact Donald Love and help him win the elections. This will be a great opportunity for the Leones, who will be able to do great things with Donald Love being on their side and becoming the new mayor. Tony starts working for Donald, where there is never a moment to rest. Apart from the strange tasks that the main character struggles with, such as obtaining a corpse so that the cannibal Donald has something to eat, Tony is primarily concerned with increasing Love's chances of winning the election. Donald Love's biggest rival is Miles O'Donovan, who is strongly supported by the Forelli crime family. Even though Tony is actively trying to tip the scales in Donald Love's favor, with such tricks as killing members of his rival campaign team or gaining support among people by publicizing various defamations about Miles O'Donovan, it doesn't matter in the end. There is more and more talk about Donald Love collaborating with the Leone Mafia. The evidence that was against Love fell into the hands of O'Donovan himself. Even though Tony Cipriani destroys all evidence that Love is associated with the mafia, the rumors hurt Love's image in the eyes of society. As a result, Donald lost the election and he was broke. In turn, Tony and Salvatore do not intend to give up. Salvatore first wants to obtain more information about the situation, especially between the mafia and politics. Sal takes Tony to have a little chit-chat with the mayor's assistant. Fearing for his life, he brings up a lot of useful but disastrous news. Well, it turns out that it is the Sicilians who play the main role here. They even have control over the head of the Forelli Mafia, Franco Forelli, and as Salvatore had already guessed, they want a big conflict between the mafias, which will destroy these organizations almost completely. As a consequence, the situation will be in favor of the Sicilians who want to take over the city. Tony and Sal must somehow counteract this. They both try to weaken the Forellis and the Sindacos. Meanwhile, Tony is contacted by a corrupt cop, a man named Leon McCaffrey. McCaffrey proposes to become allies with Tony. That's because, as it turns out, Cipriani's recent shenanigans did not go unnoticed. In exchange for keeping law enforcement away from Tony, McCaffrey asks him for a favor. The task is to help the uptown Yardies while weakening the Sindacos and the Forellis. Although Tony was quite skeptical about working with the cops at first, he accepted this proposal in the end. Unfortunately, the feds caught Salvatore at some point, who made so many mistakes that it was impossible to avoid incrimination. Sal has to go behind bars. At the same time, McCaffrey contacts Tony again and makes it clear that things have gone too far. For this reason, McCaffrey completely breaks off contact with Tony, wanting to save his ass. During Salvatore's stay in prison, Tony is constantly trying to eliminate both rival crime families, keeping in mind that only then will the Leonese be able to oppose the Sicilians. Tony even gets rid of the Don of the Sindaco crime family, Paulie Sindaco. When everything is slowly starting to go in the right direction, Tony learns from Sal that he received a tip that the Yakuza is slowly growing stronger. To somehow stop this negative progress, Salvatore orders the destruction of the weapon that the Yakuza keeps in Espatria on Staunton Island, which turns out to be a powerful military tank. After this mission, Tony is contacted by Toshiko Kasen, the wife of the current Yakuza leader in Liberty City. Seeing that Tony also wants to weaken the Yakuza, Toshiko orders him to kill her husband. When Cipriani kills Kazuki, Toshiko announces that this is the end. The woman finally feels free, which she celebrates with the extremely sad victory dance in the form of committing suicide. Well, to each their own. Meanwhile, Tony Cipriani regularly goes to church, where he meets Liberty Tree newspaper reporter named Ned Burner. Ned has a lot going on. He asks Tony for several favors, such as the elimination of people who potentially threaten the reporter's career. Of course, Ned Burner offers the mobster a generous payment in return. Fortunately, the karma finally caught up with Ned. The reporter secretly photographed the murder of Avery Carrington, for which Tony and Donald were responsible. In doing so, the reporter sealed his fate, ending up on the plate of human flesh-loving Donald Love. During these events, Love also signs a contract with Panlantic Construction Company, thus becoming a rich man once again. All because Tony destroyed almost the entire Fort Staunton, which someone will have to rebuild. This is a terrible moment in the storyline because it shows how much people are willing to do for money and how human life doesn't matter if you can earn a lot of money. Of course, a lot of people died in the disaster. Afterwards, Love must disappear from the city because he has caused big problems for the Colombian cartel. The next day, Sal is released from prison, but first, he has to appear in court for the trial. But there is a huge issue. The Sicilian mafia wants to kill Sal while he is being transported by a prison convoy. Luckily, Tony Cipriani saves Don Leone yet again. After all this, the Sicilians were afraid of the Leonese and therefore called Sal to make a truce. However, after everything they had done, they had nothing to count on. Salvatore decides to make a deal with the mayor and drive Torini and his gang out of town. Unfortunately, the Sicilians also came after Mayor O'Donovan. A great battle ensues on the small island with Portland Lighthouse, from which Sal and Tony survive. They kill Torini and make a deal with the mayor. For some time, the Leonese became #1 on the criminal map of Liberty City. Be sure to stay with me longer by subscribing to this channel. I also recommend watching the episode of Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven. That was Hubson talking to you. Thanks for watching. Take care and see you soon.